Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 21st of August of 2024. Today we have lots of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about the Kursk direction. If you remember, yesterday we were talking about a lot about the map that was published by the Commander-in-Chief, the Armored Forces of Ukraine, Syrsky. We were making analysis and we were comparing his map with the situation that we have in the Military Summary map, in different pro-Ukrainian mappers, pro-Russian mappers, and neutral mappers. And we had yesterday a lot of differences with every single map, and sometimes the differences were so big and so huge, and most likely they were so unbelievable. But telling the truth, starting of the 21st of August, we begin receiving significant number of geolocations in videos that were published both by pro-Ukrainian sources and pro-Russian sources. And in the end of everything, before we can be making this video, I can make a conclusion that most likely Syrsky was correct completely with his map, and most likely he shown us the truth, or at least something very close to the reality. So let's begin talking about this, and first we're going to talk about the eastern Sudzha flank. Today the Russian sources published a video of how they were FPV droning the Ukrainian forces in this part of the Sumy direction. As a result of FPV drone attacks, the Ukrainians suffered significant losses, lost a lot of armored vehicles and personnel carriers. The most important is that this video confirms today that the report of Syrsky about the situation in this flank yesterday was completely correct. So as you can see, as a result of offensive operation, as a result of Ukrainian offensives, we have adjusted the map and we have added the territory of Obukhovka, Pokrovsk, Snagest, and the most important, the village of Vishnyovka under complete Ukraine control. Basically, we confirmed the map that Syrsky shown us yesterday. We still haven't received anything regarding the village of Apanasovka and Byakhovo, but most likely these two villages were also captured by the Ukrainians. Now let's talk about Korenevo. The Russian sources published just a photo of a single soldier somewhere along the railways, and they're saying that this is like the confirmation of Russian control. And we have no doubts that the western part of Korenevo, the part that located to the west of the river Krepna, is under complete Russian control. The question we have and doubts we have is about the situation in the southeastern and the eastern part of the settlement. Based on the geolocations we continue receiving from this area, we can make a conclusion that most likely the 50% of the settlement of the southeastern part of the settlement is under complete Ukraine control. We're talking about this part. I have some doubts whether the Ukrainians managed to capture this part, because as I understand, this part of Korenevo is under complete Russian control, because this is very important part. There is a road, a railways, there is a forest, and this is something like a key region as an entrance to the southern part of Korenevo, to the village of Lyubinka. So most likely this part is in the complete Russian control. Now let's talk about the area between Korenevo, Kremenoye, and Alexandrovka. If you remember, yesterday we were talking about possible cauldron that Ukrainians have created. According to the map of Syrsky, this territory, there are, let's say, the forces of 810th Brigade of Armored Forces of Russian Federation, and according to the map of Syrsky, there are Russian soldiers who were encircled by the Ukrainians. So this is according to the Syrsky map. Let's take a look at this map once again, and we are talking about this region and about this number of Russian icons. And today we got a lot of geolocations that confirm this situation. For example, in this video that was published by the Russian sources, I would like to point your attention to this forest, to this, let's say, shape of the forest. And if we go back on map, we're gonna find this forest here, so that we have no doubts that this geolocation came exactly from this area. And in this video we can see how the Russian soldiers were bombing the Ukrainian positions exactly in this point, and then the Russians sent a drone to get the objective, some objective information whether the Russians managed to destroy the Ukrainian vehicles or not. This video confirms few things, and one of them is that there are strong presence of the Ukrainians in this part of the Kursk direction. So most likely the Russians are encircled, were encircled by the Ukrainians. We continue receiving the videos from the village of Olgovka. In this video we can see the significant number of vehicles of armored forces of Ukraine that were damaged or destroyed by the Ukrainians. We have significant number of FPV drones, we have significant number of destroyed vehicles that Ukrainians are sending more and more inside of this territory, probably to evacuate Ukrainian soldiers or to reinforce them or for any other purpose. Anyway, we have lots of geolocations that confirm significant clashes between Korenevo, Olgovka and possible Russian cauldron. Now let's move further and let's talk about the northern direction, about the former woman prison. This is the former woman prison, and today we got another video from this area. This video, yesterday we got the video from the 95th Brigade, today we got the second episode, and currently we can see that Ukrainians are storming the prison, but you need to understand that prison in Russia is like a stronghold. I believe that prison in any country is like a stronghold, but as talking about the Russian prison, it's like a double stronghold, or like a country inside of a country, state inside of a state. Very powerful fortification area, and according to map of Kursk, as we discussed, this territory was encircled by the Ukrainians. The Russians are far behind this area. The Russians are somewhere along the cities like Novoselovka, Dyakovka, Bakhtinka, Nechaev, Nizhny Parov, Yamskaya Steppe. So as you can see, very far. The distance between the prison itself and the possible Russian edge position is around 7 kilometers. The Ukrainians have encircled the Russians and are storming this territory. So this, for now, we haven't received any geolocation that can confirm this, that the Ukrainians have encircled and captured all these cities, just the map of Kursk. So as for these territories, we still have some doubts about the reality and about whether the Kursk map was correct or not, because from the northern part, from the city of Krymsky Byki, we got video that was published by the Russian sources, and in this video we can see the Russian media that were saying that everything is under control. Yes, this territory is under complete Russian fire, but everything is secure, everything is clear, no problems. But as you can see, this village of Krymsky Byki is located very far from the Mala Loknya, so this video doesn't confirm anything. This video confirms that the Russians are there but not here. As for the eastern Sudzha direction, we have additional changes on the ground. The Russian sources published the video of how they were bombing and attacking the edge Ukrainian positions along the tree line that was geolocated. This is the tree line that was attacked by the Russian artillery forces, and the author was saying that the Russians were attacking the Ukrainians. So obviously, and according to this information, we have adjusted the map, and this is one of the proofs that we received during the previous few days, that the Ukrainians established complete control over Martinovka. So summarizing everything, we can see that our map is around 90-95% fits to the reality, according to different reports, according to geolocations, according to the map of Kursk, according to different mappers. So this is approximately more or less plus minus situation in the Kursk direction. Now let's talk about Glushkovo area. As you can see, we start receiving more and more updates exactly from this territory, and the most important video is coming from the river of Seym. The Ukrainian sources published significant number of episodes of how they were FPV droning and attacking the Russian engineering equipment. The Russians are trying to save the logistic in this area. They're bringing more and more the engineering equipment that can build pontoon bridges. On the other hand, on the other side, the Ukrainians continue attacking this territory with cluster rounds, with cluster munition, with FPV drones, trying to destroy the Russian pontoon bridges, equipment, and so on. And as you can see, the Ukrainians are more or less effective. During these episodes, you might see that the Ukrainians destroyed significant number of engineering equipment, pontoon bridges, and so on. Some of these episodes were geolocated. The Ukrainians were attacking the Russian forces in this point. The Ukrainians were attacking the Russians in this area. If you see, as for this small part of Seym River, the Russians managed to create a pontoon bridge, but later the Ukrainians destroyed destroyed. So as you can see, the Ukrainians tried to control the situation, with the Russian logistic. The time is running, and as for today, for the first time since the beginning, let's call it like of Glushkovo offensive operation, the Ukrainians published the video of how they were bombing and attacking the city itself. For the first time since the beginning of talks about this direction, the Ukrainians began bombing city itself, which confirms that Ukrainians are entering the final preparation stage and they're about to begin the ground operation. And we got additional video from the village of Totkin itself, the same story. The Ukrainians published the video of how they were bombing the city with most likely hammer bomb with the use of MiG-29. So we see that maybe not this upcoming night, maybe tomorrow or the day after, the Ukrainians will begin the ground operation. As I understand, currently the Ukrainians are waiting for engineering equipment that they ask from the Western countries, because without engineering equipment, it's going to be very difficult to move through these fields, through these minefields, through rivers, and so on. So as soon as they will begin the ground offensive. But the Russians, of course, they are not sleeping. They try to control the situation along the border, because they understand that the main concentration of forces should be very close to the line of combat contact, and the Russians are bombing and attacking the Ukrainian territory with different types of weapon, mainly with FABs and so on. Now let's move to the Pokrovsk direction, and this is the area, this is the direction where the Russians have complete initiative in their hands. We have a lot of changes on the ground. We have a lot of geolocations, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about the city of Grodovka. We still haven't received anything from this direction that can confirm additional Russian progress in the central part of the city, but some reliable Russian sources stated that as a result of clashes during the previous few days, the Russians managed to improve their position significantly, and currently, today on the 21st of August, the Russians established and secured completely the Pushkina Street. So this is the Pushkina Street, and the Russians reached this line. Obviously significant progress. Once again, we haven't received geolocations that can confirm this, but if this information is correct, then we can start counting maybe even hours when the Ukrainians will be forced to fall back from the Grodovka completely. Obviously, the fall and the capture of Grodovka is going to be significant progress for the Russian armed forces. This will open the Russians the possibilities to move further in direction of Pokrovsk itself, not to capture the landfills, the telecoms, the coal mines, but to move in direction of Mirnograd as the first, let's say, agglomeration, the first city of the Pokrovsk agglomeration. Now let's move to the southern part. There are very heavy clashes for Novogradovka itself. We start receiving first pictures and videos from the southeastern outskirts of the city, and as you can see, the southeastern part of the city is already covered with fire. Some Ukrainian sources are saying that the Russian sabotage and reconnaissance group are already inside of the city, but as for geolocations and as for different mappers, the current distance between edge Russian positions along the railways and the first buildings is less than 300 meters. And the most important, we start receiving significant number of FPV drone attacks from the Russian side. Another important thing that I would like to point your attention, as soon as after we received the report that Ukrainians have redeployed the 47th Mechanized Brigade, some sources were saying that Ukrainians redeploying them because they lost their combat capabilities. Other sources reported that the brigade is about to be redeployed completely to the Pokrovsk direction. The Ukrainians stopped showing any resistance with FPV drones in this area. So the main core, let's say the core FPV drone squad was the squads of 47th Brigade, and now we stop receiving anything, which also made the Russian offensive much faster. Now let's talk to the eastern and to the southeastern flank of Pokrovsk. We got a lot of updates from this area as well, and let's talk. This morning, during the previous video, we talked according to different mappers, according to the sources on the ground, the Russians established complete control over Kamyshevka, and that Ukrainians were forced to fall back from Kamyshevka Novogrodovka to the village of Ptich. So that was the report by the beginning of the 21st of August. The Russians captured the village of Kamyshevka and the Ukrainians moved back to the village of Ptich. And at the same time, we got the report that the Edge Russian sabotage and reconnaissance squads entered the village of Ptich, and that at the beginning of the 21st of August, the heavy clashes began for the settlement. And right before we start making the video, we got report that Ukrainians abandoned their positions in Ptich towards the village of Korenevo, and that the Russians began assault operation of Korenevo itself. So most likely tomorrow, by the morning of the 22nd of August, we're gonna start receiving reports about complete control over the village by Korenevo by the Russians, and the Ukrainians would be forced to fall back further in the direction of the village of Mimrik. Now let's talk about the logistic, because now this is the most important. After the Ukrainians lost their logistic possibilities along M30 road, because first of all the road was cut by the Russians in the vicinity of Mykolaiivka, according very reliable sources. Now the Ukrainians are using the following supply road, and we are talking about a part of M30. Then M30 goes inside of the city of Novogrodovka. Through the city of Novogrodovka, the main supply road goes to the city of Ukrainsk, and then from Ukrainsk the Ukrainians are trying to support their forces in Mimrik. Then from the same city the Ukrainians are trying to support their forces in the city of Dalinovka and Halytsinovka. But the problem is that the Russians discovered the new Ukrainian supply road, and the Russians established complete FPV drone control over this line. And just during the previous 24 hours, the Russians published more than around 10 videos, 10 geolocations of how they were destroying the Ukrainian supply and support vehicles. In this video, we can see another Ukrainian bus, maybe that was moving, redeploying the personnel, that was attacked by the Russian FPV drones and was destroyed. In this video, we can see another Ukrainian pickup or some vehicle that's maybe FPV drone operator's vehicle that was attacked. Inside of the city during the previous date, we got another batch of videos of how the Russians were hunting and destroying everything that were moving along the streets. And as you can see, this is the new Russian tactics that Ukrainians haven't found the key how to fight with this. The Russians are sending their drones deep inside of the territory of Ukraine, and basically they establish control over everything, and if they see, as soon as they see anything moves, they destroy it as soon as possible. These tactics led to complete collapse of Ukrainian defense belt 2 weeks or 3 weeks ago in the area of Zhelana, Novozhelana. Now the Russians are doing the same around the city of Novogrodovka and Ukrainka. A lot of vehicles were destroyed, as you can see, and a lot of vehicles were destroyed inside of Selidovo itself. This is the next stronghold, and most likely due to complete absence of Ukrainian electronic warfare equipment that can suppress, that can jam Russian drones, most likely the Ukrainians will not be able to hold their lines for a very long period of time. Most likely they would be forced to fall back very soon, and without showing any resistance in the vicinity of the landfills and the terracons. So, summarizing everything, we can make a conclusion that most likely by the end of the weekend, the Russians will establish complete control over the territory that is currently under complete Ukrainian control, between the between the road M30 and the cities of Zavitna, Mizhova, Mykolaiivka, and so on. So these bridgehead, these territories will be captured by the Russians most likely within the next few days. And then the Russians will try to think what to do next, but most likely due to complete control over the logistic roads, the Russians will attack at the triangle between Mimrik, Karlovka, Zhelana, Durgoye, and they will capture all these cities and villages as well during the next 2 weeks, and then, only then, the Russians will have troubles where to move next, how to move to the west. But most likely by this time, the Russians will be able to secure the southeastern part of Grodovka, and then there are going to be no more barriers to move further in the western direction. Anyway, the Ukrainian defense in Pokrovsk is collapsing. We can't say that it's collapsing slowly, it's collapsing very fast. And the Pokrovsk front line may collapse much faster than the situation and the Russian front line in the Kursk direction. And this is the most important. Now let's move to South Donetsk direction, where the Russians managed to improve their position significantly in the vicinity of Konstantinovka. Just yesterday we were talking about significant Russian progress in the eastern part of the village, that the Russians managed to get as close as possible to the T0524 road and basically to cut the village into now there are like the southern Konstantinovka and the Garden Association Shakhtar, and now this Garden Association Shakhtar is already cut from the mainland, and as soon as the Russians managed to isolate this block, they began offensive operation. According to different mappers and different geolocations, the Russians managed have already semi-encircled this Garden Association Shakhtar from the south, from the southeast, from the east, from the northeast, and from the north. Most likely within the next few days, this block of Konstantinovka would be captured by the Russians completely, and after that we can start talking about the semi-encirclement of Konstantinovka itself, and after this progress, the Ukrainians would be forced to begin withdrawing their positions towards Katerininivka and Antonovka. And this is not something that is going to happen within months. This is going to happen maybe by the end of the next week. Also, the Russians managed to improve their positions in the vicinity of the stronghold that located on the intersections of road TO524 Vadiana-Solodke. We had the geolocation that was published by the Ukrainian sources. In these videos, we can see a number of attacks on Russian vehicles that were moving through the fields. One of the episodes was geolocated exactly in this point. Now let's move to the most important area, to Zaporizhzhia direction, because today they got the video that confirms that the Russians during the previous days managed to improve their positions in the city of Lugovskoye, and this video show us we can't load the video. Okay, let's move on. Okay, it works. In this video we can see how the Ukrainians were bombing the edge Russian positions in this area, and based on this video we have adjusted the maps. Most of the mappers have completed this, and now the sources are saying that the Russians are trying to maintain the line of combat contact before the beginning of the Ukrainian offensive. So now the Russians have already launched a series of offensive operations along the line of combat contact to get additional 1, 2, 3, 400 meters towards Ukrainian positions, and after that the Ukrainians will launch a full-scale operation. And once again, the sources are saying that this is the vital operation for the Ukrainians, because they are planning to capture the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. And of course, if the Ukrainians are able to do this, then they will force the Russians to begin the negotiation process, and most likely the terms are going to be have more even in Ukrainian favor. But the main problem for the Ukrainians is not whether they are able to capture Zaporizhzhia power plant or not. The main problem for the Ukrainians is coming from the north, from the border with Belarus, because the Belarusian forces continue concentration of their troops, armored vehicles, and tanks along the border. Currently, we don't know and we can't tell for sure whether the Belarusians are planning to cross the border. But I ask you the next thing: how do we know that all these troopers and forces are the part of Belarusian forces? Maybe these are Russian forces who are concentrating right now along the border, but they're working and operating under the false flag, under the flag of Belarus. But on the other hand, these are real Russian forces who are currently concentrating along the border with the purpose to attack in direction of Kiev as soon as the Ukrainians begin the Zaporizhzhia, a possible offensive operation version number 2. As for Toretsk and New York agglomeration, during the previous 24 hours, we haven't received a lot of updates. Just the most important thing is coming from the New York, and according to pro-Ukrainian sources, the Ukrainian soldiers haven't abandoned their positions from the inside of Citadel. The Citadel is under complete Ukraine control, and they are in a complete cauldron. Maybe the Ukrainians are planning to begin unblocking operation from the north and from the east with the purpose to release the Ukrainian forces. But telling the truth, I'm not sure that Ukrainians are able to do this. Maybe by this cauldron the Ukrainians will be able to win some time and not to allow the Russians to move further in the north until they secure the territory. And obviously to secure this stronghold will take some time from the Russian side. But on the other side, it's very, very difficult to understand whether the Ukrainians are telling the truth or not. As for the Terikon in the vicinity of Pivnichne, we have received report that the Russians managed to improve their positions, and we got the geolocation published by pro-Ukrainian sources of FPV drone attacks. As for Siversk direction, the Kupinsk direction, during the previous 24 hours, we haven't received anything special or anything important. And that's it for today. Military Summary channel reminds we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.